Welcome. I'm Jean Mosier. I'm one of the Bicentennial team with Stephanie Alamang and Lori Hansroth, and we are thrilled to have you here for our fourth in the series of bicentennial lectures that explore the economic history of Morgan County. Morgan County's bicentennial is this year. We were formed in 1820 and named for General Daniel Morgan. And so this is our 200th anniversary. And we're celebrating it in a number of ways, including these exceptionally good lectures. We have already had lectures on tomato canning, on tanneries, and on the Civil War, all of which are available in video on the berkeleysprings.com website under the Bicentennial and on the Morgan County WV website under the Bicentennial. There are a number of generous financial supporters to all of our activities for the Bicentennial, including the Morgan County Commission, Travel Berkeley Springs, the Two Rivers Giving Circle, the FAST Foundation for Art, Science, and Technology, the Museum of the Berkeley Springs, C&B Bank, and the West Virginia Humanities Council. And we thank all of them for their financial support, which allows us to do all of these activities. I want to thank our technical team here today, Tom Shade on live stream, Bob Peak on eventually a video, and Lori Hansroth also working on live stream. And of course, I really want to thank the Church of Christ, Josh Hedrick, its pastor, and all of the members of the church for allowing us to use their exceptionally fine facility here with its exceptional live stream capacity. It's wonderful to be able to have a live audience, even if it's limited, but we're glad you're here, and hopefully some of you will have railroad stories from your own life, and you'll get your chance to tell it at the end. And I'm very pleased to say that this is our second lecture by historian and educator Steve French, who also did the lecture on the Civil War and was gracious enough to agree to do this lecture on railroads in Morgan County. Because if there was any piece of the economy that is crucial to the history of this county, besides hospitality, it's the railroad, where towns rose and fell, people traveled in ways they don't today, there were incredible jobs. It really made a huge impact on Morgan County, and Steve is going to tell us all about it.
Like before I start to talk, I'd like to acknowledge Tommy Swain for helping me research this program, and Jim Drugamar put together the slideshow. He's a historian in his own right from Hedgesville, and then Rick Snowden rode around with us and took some pictures. So, the B&O, it's chartered in 1827 with the idea to get rail service into the Ohio River Valley, and it's going to take until 1852 to reach Wheeling, West Virginia, and that's complete. And it's sort of like today, thinking of the space race when it first started, the engineers are going to have a lot of problems in figuring out how to do things. Just think of the surveyors that had to go into the Alleghenies, sometimes going down the sides of mountains into small valleys on ropes and stuff like that, but the technical advances that they had to make. But it was going to reach Morgan County or have service through Morgan County by the fall of 1842. It reached Hancock in May of 1842, and they had a big celebration in Hancock when it did that, and by November 1842 it had reached Cumberland. So you had through service from here going to Cumberland, or going to Baltimore, and of course if you wanted to go to Washington, you would get off at Relay and go to Washington that way. The track didn't run as it does now from Martinsburg and Harper's Ferry directly to the Washington. You had to go to Relay. So what does it do in Morgan County? Well, it's going to really help with the tourism at the beginning. It's going to have a lot of tourists coming here. They can get here a lot faster. But just like 81 or today, if you look back to 81, 81 is built, but it takes some time for the industries and so on to develop along that road. And I remember in Martinsburg, what Martinsburg was like for many years, but then things started to develop along that road. And same with the railroad, and you're going to have towns, small towns in Morgan County, from Cherry Run to Paw Paw, develop along this road, and a lot of people in those towns are going to work for the railroad, and they're also going to deliver things to the railroad. Farmers are going to be nearby. You're going to have later on the sand industry, the orchard industry, and so on. So it's going to be a big economic impact to this county. But then over the years, as some of these industries start to die off and the passenger service starts to die off in the trains, you're going to have some of these towns like Cherry Run, Magnolia, and Paw Paw, they're going to start losing population. So it's going to add for a while, but then you're going to have a decline as things change. The road is a little bit over, railroad back in 1842 was a little bit over 40 some miles. It's going to basically follow the river, and which is easy. As far as constructing the railroad, there's only going to be 2 tunnels at that time, one at Doe Gully and also one at Paw Paw. Being close to the railroad, though, being close to the river, though, will make it hard on through traffic in times of flood. So you're going to have big floods that will affect the railroad. So what we're going to do is go through the different towns along the B&O and tell some stories about them and so on. And then we're going to concentrate on the Magnolia Cutoff, which was the big B&O project of the early 1900s, one of the great engineering projects in U.S. history. Okay, here's a map of Morgan County. You're familiar with that, and it's going to show on that map the line of the B&O, both lines, which would be the main line of 1842, and also what becomes the main line through the Magnolia. So you have the main line here, Great Capon, and then here's the old line, and here's the cutoff, which will come in approximately in 1914. Now, this is Cherry Run. You see it looks a lot different today than it did then. This is approximately in the 1920s. Now, from your left to right, you would have the freight station, baggage station there, the ticket station, passenger terminal there, and on the other side, the offices of the B&O and also the Western Maryland. Now this will change. You don't have it there anymore, but it was taken out as track alignment changed. They needed to change track alignment later on in the 1920s, so that all disappeared. Cherry Run, I sort of grew up there. My grandparents, Lester Baker and Marie Baker, lived in Cherry Run, and I can remember back in the late 1950s and so on, Cherry Run was a pretty prosperous small town. Lots of people had good jobs on the railroad. Others, of course, worked over to Hagerstown, some of the industries over there. But it was a vibrant community in that time period. There was passenger service still in Cherry Run at that time. Did anyone ever ride the passenger train from Cherry Run into Martinsburg? Here I'm the only one. I can't believe it. But I remember riding there, and I had an uncle, Walter Buck French, that worked at Miller's Tower at Cherry Run. So I remember what was, I guess, the end of its heyday very well. But just like all company towns, you could call it, it's a B&O town. People are connected with that there one way or another. A lot track gangs working now there, track walkers, and so on. Okay, this is a shot of the station. Now, the Western Maryland has a station on one side and the B&O on the other. The Western Maryland crossed about 1915, crossed the Potomac in 1915 on the bridge, and there was also a low-grade line that ran through Berkeley County along some distance north of the main line and would come in to right here. This would be the low-grade line, and but you know, lots going on. But this is back in the 1920s. It's not there today. Now this is a picture of the crossing, the Cherry Run. We're going to get in, talk about some sidelights, I guess, talking about some of the accidents and other things that went along on the track. But very dangerous around these tracks, especially in the 1890s and early 1900s. And if you get into the old newspapers, the old Morgan Messenger or the Baltimore American, Baltimore Sun, you can't hardly go a week without seeing some accidents, tragic accidents happening between Harper's Ferry and Paw Paw. Now, I put this picture up to tell you about John Rankin. He was a well-known engineer of the time, and this is back in 1896. And in one evening there in January, early January 1896, he was just walking to Deadhead on a freight train back to Martinsburg where he lived, and he just happened to walk in front of the East Express, and tragic loss there. But that was in 1896, and just to show you how often these things happen, just about a week later in Cherry Run, a worker, probably a Western Maryland worker from Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania, somehow he got his leg caught in the track between the rails, and he was run over there. So that was just two people right in just 1 week in Cherry Run back at that time. But if you ever interested, just get in the old newspapers and write in Cherry Run or write in Paw Paw and give it a time period 1910 to 1920, and these things will pop up. Okay, the Western Maryland, as I said, also came to Cherry Run, crossed over there, and this is a picture of their old roundhouse that's set across the track on the north side of the track there. And this is another picture of the ticket office. But Cherry Run, you go today, I was just talking to the pastor a while ago, and he says there's not much there now. No, there's not, but years ago, I can remember what it was like in the 50s, but if some of you can remember what was back in the 40s and maybe the 30s, it was even a larger town then. So it was important in the Civil War. There's a bridge nearby there. And what else did I want to say? The 1936 flood. It really put the two big floods that came through that really put the railroad out of the commission in this area, the 1924 and 1936 floods. And I remember people telling me about watching animals and houses and so on go down the river, and some of these houses smash into the Western Maryland Bridge there at Cherry Run. Okay, going up the track for 4 more miles, you come into Sleepy Creek. Probably it was never that big of a town, but a number of people lived there. It was a church there and some stores, and they also had a good ball team sometimes, a baseball team over the years. People lived there. But this is the bridge in Sleepy Creek. It was also destroyed a couple times during the war. Here's the baggage station looking west at Sleepy Creek. Now, another part of the economic development of Morgan County, there is a grade of anthracite coal on top of Short Mountain, about 8 miles west of here. There's a deposit of it. And back in the late 1800s, there was an idea to start a railroad in Sleepy Creek, follow the Sleepy Creek to the Meadow Branch and go up that valley and to try to get the coal from those mines, but it never panned out. There was never enough coal there. The way it was explained to me, the way the coal was, one layer would jump and it would only be so high, and then it would jump again, and it wasn't going to be feasible, but there was some activity there. And also there was a sort of a grisly murder up there. One of the workers killed the boss. We've never been able to track it down. His name was Chappelle. But that was the idea, to run a new line to those coal fields. Okay, Alpine Depot, not very far from here, right across the river from Hancock. And Hancock would be, the Alpine would be the stop for the B&O and to get the products from Hancock. Of course, Hancock had the canal, they had the National Pike also going back and forth. But Alpine's really had its a heyday during the Civil War as far as history is concerned. You had the Jackson's attack on Hancock, his bombardment of Hancock on January 5th, 1862. Later on, you had Confederate occupation of Hancock during the Gettysburg campaign. And then in July 31st, 1864, there was even a fight there that involved an armored train and cross-river fighting between the Confederates and Union Army. But back in the old Civil War books and letters by the participants, Hancock and Alpine Depot come in a great deal. Lots of memoirs about soldiers that were in Alpine Depot. Let's see. Okay, this is the old depot. It's with the 1975 picture of it, not too long ago, and it's still over there today, but always been a lot of activity in that area. Just as, once again, a side note, there was a murder there that took place in August 11th, 1907. It's almost like a story out of the Twilight Zone, where a well-known fiddler of the time, musician Morris Van Gosen, was murdered there by mistake. There had been a big party up on picnic up on Lover's Leap, the grounds up there, and Morris was one of the fiddlers. And as he came back to his rented room, he was mistaken for another man because he was wearing the same type of hat. And the murderer shot him at a distance of 15 feet with a shotgun, but he made a great mistake, and he regretted it. But all sorts of stories, as I say, you can find as you look into these old newspapers. Now, this is a picture upriver from Hancock. You show the steam engine, the diesel, and a freight train going by. I'm not sure what time period this is, probably in the 1940s. But those of you that can remember the steam engines, I've watched documentaries of railroads and so on, and people who worked on steam engines, one remark they make from occasionally is that a steam engine was almost like a living thing. It was different from the diesel. The diesel was quiet and so on, but that steam engine had so many working parts, they had to keep oiled and had to keep everything just up to snuff. It was almost like that steam engine was alive when it was going. And I've heard that even from men who were engineers back in the days of steam. Now, Sir John's Run, as many of you know, Sir John's Run, it was the stop for Berkeley Springs. That's if you were going to Berkeley Springs up until I think 1888. By train, you would get off at Sir John's Run and you would travel from Sir John's Run by stagecoach. And this is a picture of a group of vacationers, maybe taking a tourist train on the B&O, but they've stopped at Sir John's Run. But just that was where you got off the train. You didn't get off at Alpine to come to Berkeley Springs. You got off at Sir John's Run. Okay, this is another picture of Sir John's Run. It was the scene, like Cherry Run, it was another place that was heavily flooded during the years of the B&O service there. And it was also the scene in 1933 of a big derailment. Freight train derailed east of Sir John's Run. Two hobos or riders, two African Americans were killed. There were 50 on there. Wallace Hill, who's probably 96, 97 now, but he was just a young man, and he lived in Sir John's Run, and he always told me, I was out playing with my brother, and I just put my foot on the first step to go into the house when I heard this crash and turned around, and out in the fields he could see people running everywhere. But once again, you had these accidents along the track. Just a few weeks later, in the Morgan Messenger, they commented two men were found dead at the station at the Sir John's Run. Evidently, they had tried to jump off there as from a freight and didn't make it. This is some of the big equipment. This is a coaling station. I'll back out of the way. Coaling and water station. Now, I forget how many tons that was, but it's big. It's something like 60 tons. And it was in service during the days of steam. But once again, you go back to this economic development, you had to have workers around these places. Trackmen, people with this coaling station, people working in the towers and so on. But today they've been replaced by mechanization and electronics. You don't need the towers anymore. And I think they run everything out of Jacksonville now, the switches and so on. But great employment. Like I mentioned my uncle before, when he was in grade school in Allensville, the teacher there taught him how to use the telegraph. And that gave him a job the rest of his life. When he was 16 or 17, he went right to work for a railroad. But so the employment was the important thing. And these people had big families, so you had quite a few, quite a large population, some of the towns. Okay, coming to Great Cacapon, this was the longest bridge before the Magnolia Cutoff was completed, but this was the longest bridge along the B&O in Morgan County, about 300 feet long. Here's a picture of it today. Rick Snowden took it a few weeks ago, and it was also destroyed a number of times during the Civil War. That was in, once again, Great Cacapon, another town. Lots of the men worked on the B&O. If any of you read my story in the Messenger this week about the great accident that took place on the Western Maryland back in 1906, I believe, 1907, on the Western Maryland, not far from Great Cacapon, where five Great Cacapon men were killed. But Great Cacapon, another town, that today it still has, I'm not sure how many people live there, but it still has a significant population again, but not what it had during the days of especially steam and early diesel. Now this is a map which may be hard to see, showing them what's going to be called the Magnolia Cutoff. Now, when around 1910, what was happening was the B&O was picking up too much traffic coming from the west, and it was getting tied up and slowed down at Hansroach. And they had to come up with a way to solve it. And they did, and they solved it quickly. And this is back in the days of the Panama Canal. All these big construction projects going on. And you'll be amazed, they're going to get everything ready. They're going to budget $6 million. They're going to start and finish this big project, as you'll see, in just 19 months. 17 months of actual construction. But the ideas start going into place. Daniel Willard's the president of the B&O, and he has a top engineer named Francis Stewart and other engineers, and they come up with the plan, and what the idea is to bypass these bends and make it shorter. But to do that, they have to go into the sides of the ridges and up into the hills. And it's going to be tough work, but it's going to be very successful. It's still used today. Okay, we're coming up to Orleans now. This is looks like a passenger train going through Orleans, just mentioned. Some of you remember this well. Back in 1980, there was a wreck there near, not at this point, but east of there. It killed a female engineer, Barbara Hopkins. Think back, you can probably recall that, but it's a little mix up in the switching. She was in the right lane, track, but the other freight wasn't. And she was killed there in 1980. Okay, this is another picture Rick Snowden took a few weeks ago, showing what is the start of the Magnolia Cutoff from looking from Orleans towards Doe Gully. Now, I usually don't read things, but I just want to read this to give the whole magnitude of this endeavor. Okay, this Magnolia Cutoff, as we'll go through it in a little bit, is from March 1913 through 1914. Okay. The main line will remain in service. The old line that was built in the 1840s through there was going to remain in service at the same time. Okay? They're going to budget $6 million. It's going to come in under that figure. There's going to be 7 different contracting companies working on it, including the American Bridge Company from near Pittsburgh. When it's finished, savings will total $25,000 a month, but within a few years, they're going to be figuring they're saving $500,000 a year. So it's going to pay for itself in a short time. Now we talk about $6 million. Take that in our terms today, probably about $120 to $125 million in our money. Okay, just listen to these figures. 25. You have 7 different companies working on it. 2,500 workers, 2 power plants, 22 power shovels, 57 locomotives, okay, 2 locomotive cranes, 550 dump cars, 6 concrete plants built along the line, 126 steam drills or air drills, 2 sawmills, a 40-engine blacksmith shop, okay? But it's an enormous project, and camps are built in Doe Gully, Hansroach, Magnolia, Kessler, and Paw. And all these camps have good sanitation, they have good water. All these men have to be fed every day. So, it's a big project. It's something, if you look back on some of the old pictures of the Panama Canal, of how they're building with the, doing the construction and so on, with the steam shovels and the concrete plants and the cars running back and forth being filled all the time. And this is going to be completed from construction time to finish within 17 months. Now, if you go down to Johnsontown on Route 9, they've been working on that little bridge since, I think, the end of January. This is September. Of course, they had to stop for a while. That's just a small bridge, and you'll see this is a big project. Okay, this is from the B&O magazine back in, I think, 1920 or so. And it's showing beauty spots along the upper Potomac. All 7 of the 8 are in Morgan County. They wanted tourists to see these spots as they go through. And the project has already been completed, but it's hard to see it, but Doe Gully's on there, and Magnolia, in different spots. Okay, this is some of the construction. Doe Gully is about 2 miles west of Magnolia, and they had to bench those mountains to prevent rock slides. This is something like you would see if some of you remember the construction of Route 68 through Sidling Hill. And that mountain had to be benched. And at the same time, the main line is right beside this. They're doing all this work. Okay, this is some of the construction of Doe Gully. Here's the old tunnel. You're coming up the Randolph Tunnel here. Here's the old line. One enormous undertaking. Enormous undertaking. Okay, and there's a picture of Doe Gully today. Randolph Tunnel. Okay, now this one made a world record when it was built. Okay, it's 1,014 feet long. It was very tough construction because of the way the rocks were. They had a problem with slides and so on. But it took just 11 months to build. Just 11 months to build. So it's about 2/10 of a mile long, and it sets the record. Okay, Hans Roach. Now this is where the problem was. As they came to Hans Roach on the old line, it was slowing everything down, the grade there. Now Hans Roach would be bypassed by this new Magnolia Cutoff. That's a picture of it today. Okay, Stewart Tunnel. Tommy took me down there one time, interesting place to see, but this was the toughest one to build in this Magnolia Cutoff. It was over 3,000 feet long, and once again, very unstable rock formations there. But it's named after Francis Stewart, the main engineer, project engineer on the cutoff. Now we're coming to Magnolia. Now this is a town that at one time, during this period, 1913 to 1914, there were almost 2,000 people living in this area. And that included the construction gangs. And you had all sorts of businesses here. Bakeries, all kinds of stores, and so on. This is an old picture of it showing the station. Right here. Here's the tower. And it looks like here it might be an old car from out of the Civil War. But this is the main line of the 1942 construction. But once again, over 2,000 people living in that area. Okay, this is a picture from the cutoff showing the approach to the Magnolia Bridge. Here's Magnolia during the construction. Here are the piers being put in by the American Bridge Company. Here's the tower you just looked at. So the cutoff will go over Magnolia. The old line will continue following the river. The cutoff will go over Magnolia. It'll enter into a tunnel, go across the bridge, enter into the tunnel that's in Maryland, and then come back with another bridge over into West Virginia. I think it saves about 4 miles. Here's the Magnolia Bridge, once again being put in by the American Bridge Company, and they're putting down the steel girders. This is back in 1914. Okay, this is a picture we took the other day showing the old concrete piers. And over here would be Maryland. Here's the river. Okay, this is a picture you see many books, an old picture of Magnolia Bridge after it was completed in 1914. And then going into this tunnel, I'm doing it the wrong way, going into this tunnel, Graham Tunnel, named for another engineer. Okay, Graham Tunnel, give you a couple facts on this. 1,580 feet long, okay? 3/10 of a mile or so. But Graham is in Maryland. You're across the river, you see right through it to the other side. Okay. Okay, there's a better picture of it, showing the chassis system coming out, locomotive. Now, this is a picture of the Kessler Bridge and that connects Maryland and West Virginia. A couple of things. It crosses back into West Virginia. This bridge is going to cross back into West Virginia. Both bridges combined, and get this, use 16,000 yards of concrete, okay, and 3,000 tons of steel. And remember, these are going to be completed sometime within 17 months. Really, they completed ahead of schedule. They were running one line before both lines were finished. But an enormous amount of work, once again named after one of the engineers. We're coming up to what's called the concrete wall. Okay, the concrete wall just past this Kessler Bridge. Now we're back in West Virginia. This is a wall built above. Here's the old line down here. Here's the new line, the Magnolia Cutoff, going right along this bridge, or right along the bridge. Okay, another enormous amount of work. 80,000 cubic tons of rock are going to be removed from the side of that ridge, okay, and 1,000 feet long. Okay, the retaining wall is 1,800 feet long, 31 feet high. Okay, and, 15 feet high, 2.5 feet wide at the bottom and 15 at the top. Over 22,000 yards of concrete are used in that wall. Now this exists today, this doesn't. This has been taken out of service by 1961. But enormous amount of work, enormous amount. But once again, they had everything ready to go and the men in place, and they did it. And some of the machines, I didn't have pictures of them, but some of the machines they made so they could pour the concrete at the same time to keep the main line running below. Okay, coming into Hancock, you have the Carruthers Tunnel. This is about 900 and some feet long. So we went from having 2 tunnels on the old main line, the 1942 line, to now 4 tunnels, and you're raised above the river. Okay, coming into Paw Paw Station. A lot went on there over the years. It was a place where the famous Union General Frederick Lander was taken from. He died in Paw Paw, and they had a ceremony there before he left for Washington. But it was also the place where one of the greatest shootouts happened in West Virginia history. All of you have heard about the shootout at Matewan in the coal fields in 1920, where even a Hollywood film made about. A similar shootout happened in Paw Paw in 1905. There had been an argument on a train between a man named John Price and some Italian railroad workers. They were coming down from Cumberland and on a Saturday evening, a lot of drinking going on. Fortunately for Price, he wasn't drinking. And there was a scuffle right before they got to Okanoka near Paw Paw. Price was forced from the train, and the argument continued. When the train got to Paw Paw, Price ran for Nixon's store as fast as he could. When he got in the store, he wanted to buy a pistol because the Italians were armed. They'd already showed him their guns and knives, and he ran into the store. The clerk said he wouldn't sell it to him, but the owner, Nixon, was there, and he said, "Here, take mine." And in the ensuing fight outside around this station, Price killed 3 Italians with 5 shots under fire. Sort of like if you've ever watched the movie Matewan, the fighting that breaks out in that town. But this is long forgotten. I've only had one person ever tell me they remembered hearing about it, but way back there. Okay. Now, I'm always interested in the Paw Paw Tunnel because not too many people ever knew it existed. But there was a rail tunnel in the Paw Paw. This is showing it being uncovered about 1904. Here's a picture of it in its heyday. The Confederates did try to destroy it in the Civil War, but they were unsuccessful. And Barbara Norton gave me these pictures, but I've always, here it is uncovered. Everybody knows about the Paw Paw Tunnel and the C&O Canal, but very few know about this tunnel. But Paw Paw, connected with the railroad, the tannery there, the orchards there, the apple industry. Just think of the apple industry that was in Morgan County at one time. I was reading some figures, I don't know whether it was 1950 or 45, 950 carloads of apples were shipped out of Paw Paw in one season. So, the industry developed due to the transportation that's going to be provided. Now finally, we'll stop at this. Berkeley Springs also had its own rail line that began in 1888. As you remember, I told you about Sir John's Run being the stagecoach stop for Berkeley Springs. That would end in 1888 as service to Berkeley Springs was going to be delivered by the Berkeley and Springs and Potomac Railroad. And that was a coordinated effort between the county and also the B&O Railroad. And the B&O would buy this out. Later on, I think the county had put up $30,000 to help with the construction, but they will buy the county out and control it from then on. The sand industry. This is transportation, jobs, and economic development in the area due to the railroad. Now, I'm not sure about this. I've read this that the passenger service ended about 1933. They had 3 passenger cars a day, but I'm not sure if it may have continued beyond that. But this was, as far as 3 cars a day coming into Berkeley, or 3 trains a day coming into Berkeley, it ended about 1933. But as you see, over this county, there was a number of things that developed because of the railroad that helped for the economic well-being. It provided a lot of jobs. It provided a way to get products to market. And but over the years, you've had a demise of these things. The apple industry is gone. Of course, you still have the sand industry. The apple industry is more or less gone. The leather industry. Mechanization has taken away many of the railroad jobs. But all in all, it's the B&O is the biggest thing that ever happened to this county besides the Springs.